Hi, my name's Kathy Millett, and this week we're still looking at tarmac, but a different method. So this week's real world photos are taken from the Library of Congress website, loc.gov, and it's the American Memory Collection, the sort of historic American building and architectural survey. And they have some amazing photos of docks. They show such wonderful textures on the tarmac, quite a lot of patching, and definitely not smooth and even like you might see in newer tarmac, because these are quite old and near the end of their life. But it's that effect that I want to go for. A little bit of quirkiness, a little bit of interest, and not necessarily flat and smooth tarmac. So what's another easy method to use? Well, this one, you can't get much more simple. You put on some grey paint and you sprinkle on a texture. Now I'm going to use 2 or 3 different textures just to show you what they look like. And over the years I've put them all down already on my dock, and some I like better than others. Some I think are a little large for HO, some are a little small for HO. So there's a range here if you're doing N or O. All of these can be used. So first up, what are the main products I'm going to use? Well, apart from the paint and the glue, which we'll get to in a minute, it's what goes on the surface. And I tend to use Carborundum silicon carbide grit. I think it gives a great texture. I bought this ages ago. This is a really big pack, and this is, what rate is this? So it's silicon carbide powder. It's used for if you're tumbling stones and lapidary and all that kind of stuff to polish stuff. And this one is F400. It's very fine, and I've got a bit around the edge. It's very, very fine. It's almost like a powder. I think it's a bit too fine for HO. Might be really good for N though. I've also bought, because I ran out, a new pack of 220 grit. Now this is the one that I probably would use the most in HO. It's my favourite grit, and it paints up nicely. Now you do need to paint this if you're using this grit, and the reason for that is it's a little sparkly. So when you look and you do this, you get a kind of little glitter, which isn't very typical for tarmac. So it's a great texture, it's not a great colour, even though it almost looks right when you first put it down. So this is Chinchilla Dust. Yes, it really does exist. When I use Chinchilla Dust on, quite on the internet, people go, what on earth is that? Now, I got it off the internet and I went into my local pet store and found a bag. I'm sure you can get it on Amazon as well. And it's used for chinchillas because they have very fine fur and they somehow use it in their grooming. So it's a great product. I think it's a little large for tarmac. It's great for gravel in HO scale, but in O scale it would make a great tarmac. But I'm going to put a patch on it. Well, actually I've already put a patch on, so I'll probably show you the patch that I've already done so you can see what it's like. But it's the same technique as the rest for putting it down. So the only other product you could use is grout. Now this is black tile grout. You can use it. I just don't. I always use it for my soil, so I'm looking for something different when I go for tarmac, so I've got a different texture. So what do I do first? Plastic cup, paint, and then my secret ingredient. Now there's all sorts of things you can do, but I find if you put paint on, it dries really quickly and the scatter doesn't stick, and then you get a bald patch, which is very hard to cover up afterwards. So I use slow drying medium. This is just an artist's acrylic product, and this is Windsor and Newton. There are thousands of brands that do it. It's really common, and it just stops your acrylic paint drying as quickly, which is perfect for what we want to do here. So I'm just going to mix those together till I get a nice sloppy paste, about half and half paint and acrylic medium. I don't need it to be too thick. I'm just putting it down to show the colour more than anything else. Here we go. I'm just going to put a big blob of paint in. This is Payne's Grey. It's my favourite colour. I rarely use black. I tend to use Payne's Grey. It's just a bluey black grey. Here we go. It's a gel, as you can see, so a little bit more. Now, the only thing I find then is this is a bit too thick, so I'm going to add a little bit of water. Now, my water, gosh, that is quite solid. My water is incredibly manky. It's my brush water. I don't really mind, so I'm just going to find my pipette and pipette in. I think it's got a bit of a, yeah, there we go. just about a third water as well. So that's about a third of each of them. But I'll see how the water looks when I've blended it all together. Now I did mix this a little bit thick, so when I painted it on, I could still see the brush marks, and it's not a problem, but it does mean that I had to go back and sand later. So the smoother you can get this, and the thinner and the flatter to start with, the better. So I'm just going to get this. Now the trick on this is going to be to put a very, very small hole in the corner and do it out the bag. I will hoover this up in the end, but in the meanwhile there's going to be quite a bit of this just sitting around. So you can see I just literally pour it on. And you'll see it kind of soaks up the liquid a little. It doesn't matter if you put it on too thick, because it will all just hoover off. There we go. Next up, I just hoover it off. This is a dedicated hoover. You can't use a normal hoover in tights, which you might do for other scenery material, because, well, the grit just goes straight through the tights. So this hoover I just use for scenery materials. This stuff is quite manky and very thin, so just clean it well afterwards. So I need to leave that to dry a bit. I can't take any more off now because it's just sitting with the paint. And I'm going to carry on and do the rest of it, and we'll come back and take the rest of the excess off with a brush in a bit. Set overnight, I'm just going to hoover it all off, and this takes a long time. So I'm using my dedicated hoover, and I'm emptying out that Carborundum grit regularly, and just keep going. Now at the same time, I do use a brush just to loosen any Carborundum, because I don't want any spare left. I've just got this brush here, but any brush will do. Just something to make sure that it is well stuck, because otherwise it will just bring off your paint later when you try and put layers on, and it does clump together quite a bit. So just make sure it's well and truly loose. Now I did wonder if I had it a bit thick, and I have, because I've got some lumps and bumps where the paint was ridged, and that's easily taken care of with just a bit of a sandpaper. It's a bit of a pain to do, but it gets a much smoother finish. Now I didn't do that the last time, and I think it's because my glue was a bit thinner. So just something to watch. You do want a thin glue that spreads nice and level. Well, this is dying, so I'm going to switch over to my normal hoover. Most of it's off now, and I've smoothed most of it out. So you've got a choice. You can either be better at putting on your paint and getting it quite smooth to start with, or you can spend a bit more time with the hoover and the sanding paper afterwards. Either way, you end up with a surface that has Carborundum, paint, and the underlayer. So it was looking good, and then I cleaned the track. What can I say? I tried running my train down and it derailed in a few places. And I think what's happened is, over the years, the card has swollen up a bit. So I got out my X-Acto knife and trimmed it. As you can see here, all the nice cream bits are trimmed sections, where the X-Acto knife was just used to take off a layer of card. And then I had to go over and do another layer of just grit. And actually, it's not a problem, because you can easily put another layer on and sand it, just like I did with the first layer, and you then get a much smoother finish than you might get with one. It looks a bit patchy now because the first set of grit that I put down didn't have a colour. It was matte medium, not paint, whereas the darker sections are where I used paint. So you can see the new and the old grit where I filled in. I'm pleased with how the smoother sections came out. There is going to be a giant building over this eventually, which should get rid of any other issues that I have there. But I'm very pleased how all that came out, so we're going to see what it looks like when it's painted. Now on this section, you can see the Chinchilla Dust in the background and the 220 grit in the foreground. And I like the Chinchilla Dust. It's just a little large for me in HO. I think it would be perfect in O, and I use it for gravel areas in HO. Now this is the fine 400 grit. It's much, much paler and it hardly has any texture. So I think you could use that in N scale very well, and you probably wouldn't even need to paint it. Carborundum! 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 Just trips off the tongue, doesn't it? Carborundum. Or you could just call it silicon carbide, because that's really catchy as well. I mean, it's just a bit shiny, isn't it? I didn't like to say anything. This old section's been shiny for years. I mean, she's put up with that for years. Oh, I don't know how she does it. Anyway, next week she's painting it much better. But for now, a little bit shiny. Yeah, we can hope she paints it soon. Next week, as she's promised. Enough about Carborundum. Carborundum. 4 syllables. I mean, that's almost bigger than I am. No, I thought I'd sneak downstairs. A sneak peek of the jungle diorama. This is the halo diorama she's building. It's huge! I mean, huge! I mean, wow, I can't even see the top. I'm HO. I mean, he's huge. I mean, really big, big guy, but wow, look at that tree! I mean, it's there to make him look small, but flipping heck, I feel tiddly, and N-Scale Kathy refuses to come near it. She just says, it's too big and she can't cope. She's little. But anyway, so next, you can get in it.